Paul asked one specific request. He's seen as a bit of a rock star, and he wants a rock star entrance. So let's give him a big round of applause for Paul.
So anybody that knows me knows that is the furthest thing from the truth. All right, well, thank you all for coming out here to talk about GreenOps. I know it's a little bit outside of the FinOps realm, but let's take a journey together. Maybe I can inspire you to start your own GreenOps practice. All right, I have a co-presenter, obviously not here. Deborah Bernstein from Intel. She helped put this together. She's a sustainability expert, and if you really ever want to talk about embedded carbon, she is the person you want to talk to, because she's been involved in the chip making process and all of the detail that goes behind that. So let's get into this. Starting simply, what is GreenOps? GreenOps is the study and practice of sustainability in the cloud, very much the same way that FinOps is the study and practice of cloud economics. You're going to see that it's paralleled all through this presentation. What are we trying to achieve with our GreenOps? We're trying to raise sustainability to be a value in your company the same as performance, security, all of the things that your technology teams value. And that's a lot, right? It's going to take some time. So how do we go through and build into that? We started simple by going out, meeting with all the interested parties. We met with senior management teams, we met with impact teams, and we met with our ESG team. And they all have a vested interest in this because they want to put sustainability forward. But your ESG team is going to care a lot too, because one of the new things that they're being asked is how are you managing your vendor cloud emissions? And GreenOps is how you're going to do that, at least for the cloud. So that can be a big part of your company. When you do that, you want to take all the feedback that they gave you and figure out what you're going to do as a strategy. What are the things you can do to have an impact for them? The most important thing that you're going to need to do, though, is figure out how to create measures so that you can take the things that you're doing and show the impact to the organization as a whole. And I'm going to get into that. But the last thing I would recommend to you is go through and communicate it across your entire company. This whole presentation is actually done on a purely volunteer basis. So everything I show you in here, people volunteer their time. Nobody is forced to do it. And you're going to see that throughout your organization, that people are going to line up to help you. All right, so I'm going to ground us a little. Everybody probably started with their own data center. They owned it all. If you were here before, they talked about how complicated it is to measure. But that's not the space we're in. All this scope 1 carbon that they measure, all the power generation, all that stuff in your data center, not as important to you, right? We move into the cloud, the dynamics change a lot, right? You're a renter in this space. So everything's scope 3 in here, right? And so mostly what you're really looking to do is control your usage. There's some other dynamics in here that we want to talk a little bit into. So really, what's your metric in this space? Carbon intensity is really the metric when you're in the cloud environment, right? And carbon intensity is really a combination of operational carbon and embedded carbon. I'm not going to really get into that too much. If you're ready to talk about that, that's a next level sort of conversation. But just know that the two factors are there, and you want to actually take that carbon intensity and use that as your measure to propel your practice forward in this space. So there's a few new things now that you're trying to manage carbon emissions as you approach, right? You're in the cloud, you get to choose a vendor. Not all vendors are equal in this space. The good ones will tell you they're good. The other ones try to talk about something else. They're all trying to get better, which helps everybody because the playing field we're on is improving along with us anyway. One of the other choices that you get to make that actually has a large impact is what region you're going to run your compute in. And that's not usually something people think about when they're making their region selections. So I'm going to actually give you an example of that. The other major change in this space is the time of day that you run your jobs and use your compute actually matters, right? So neither of those are real FinOps activities, so I just bring them up so we can talk through them a little bit so you understand the changes. Now I know everybody loves this slide. So the map behind it is a carbon intensity map of the power grids across the world. Obviously, the greener it is, the greener the operational carbon created in those power generation space. And so you can see where you are matters dramatically, right? And this map, there's a couple different people that have them. There's watt time. These are updated hourly, so they're very accurate. And you can use them, to gain a lot of insight into what's going on in your space. Now, my partner, Deborah, she went through and did a POC for us to help illustrate this. She took a baseline batch job and ran it in Ireland. You can see the Irish power grid. It's kind of the middle of the road in the green scale, right? So when she ran it, it had a carbon intensity of 260, right? The job ran, she used 5.4 carbon equivalents in this space, right? She took the same job and ran it later in the day when the carbon emissions were much lower, and she saved 20% just by shifting the time. She ran the exact same job, no change in resources, nothing else. That's pretty good for just picking different time. We do the same thing. We pick up the job and actually run it in France, not in Ireland. It's dramatically different because France is a very green place in carbon emissions. They're mostly nuclear country. So their carbon emissions is very low. And by taking that and actually running in France, you save 82%. Exact same job, same resources, doing the exact same thing. So you can see it's a pretty powerful choice. All right, now we're going to get to the meat of it, right? We talked about the differences. How do we measure it? This is sort of the most important part here because we need to be multi-cloud. The cloud providers themselves really don't come to the table to make actionable kind of things for us. They all provide the information. They do it in a way that's good for your sustainability reporting, not really for taking action, right? So you want to use their tools, but for external reporting. What I'm proposing is for you to run an internal program here to measure your performance and make improvements in that space. So this is a cloud carbon footprint tool that we actually took some usage through, created the dashboard. And part of what makes it really useful in the middle here, it's all broken out by our business units. So we start to get accountability for the people and their usage in the carbon space, right? You can break it out by regions so you can see where all the various things. You can do more than this dashboard has because it gets down to resource level carbon emissions. So that resource level enables you to do it at the app ID level, at the team level. You can even do it for each individual resource that you have. It's really powerful because you can use the data to go through and project your improvement projects, right? So if you think you're going to undertake something, you want to know what you're going to do, you can use those metrics and add it to your potential cost savings as another benefit. So it's truly a powerful tool. The only challenge I would say here is this is the one place that takes a little bit of commitment. This particular tool is actually an application that you have to bring in, connect to your data. So the commitment itself is really around, getting some technical resources to make the data connection, stand up the application, and do some of that report building. There's other ways you can do it if you don't need to be that committed to it. Cloud Carbon itself, they actually have the data available to you in GitHub about the resource actuals. So you could actually go through, and I do an example later that I did where I took the resources I had and applied their data to it in Power BI and did it outside of the tool completely. So you have the ability to go get the data and use it for your specific purposes. And that in itself is very valuable because you don't have to put any time into it beyond understanding what you're trying to do and how to measure it. Oh, and this is multi-cloud too. All right, I'm not spending much time on this. I know it's a pretty slide too, and it's very FinOpsy, and that's the point. You all already know how to save carbon, right? every single activity that people have been talking to about right-sizing, reducing your resource usage in this space, improving your utilization, changing your architecture to serverless technologies. All of those things save you lots of money, but they also reduce your carbon emissions. So you're already doing a lot of these things here, and you know how to do them, and your practice is, very skilled at doing it. So we're going to use those skills. So what does it look like when you decide what to do? Again, somebody volunteered, showed up to me with this project. We had a heavy AI airflow process that was running. Very compute intensive, very challenging to manage and run. It was underutilized because it needed to only run at certain points in time, and it had a heavy workload. So it was primed for needing some changes and updates, and it was a mess on the FinOps dashboard. So I worked with the team, and we decided that we could convert this into a serverless design, and it fixed most of the problems, right? It became simpler, it scaled infinitely. It did all the good things that serverless technologies, I'm sure you've heard people talk about it in this space. So nobody's surprised when it looks like this. We saved 95% of the money that we were spending. We cut out almost all of the resources. Our scaling is completely driven by the demand. So everything is excellent and positive in this space. But look at this, same project. I have more to share. We cut out 12 kilowatts of power usage by making this change. We reduced the carbon emissions by 90%. I didn't do any more work, I did the same amount of work. But we have so much more benefit that we can take advantage of in this space. And to boot, I know this isn't something you can do everywhere, but in this particular design, we can actually even layer on the time shifting that I started talking about before. And if we can control when the demand comes in to lower carbon intensity times, you can make it even better. So that's what it looks like in action. Hopefully it resonates with all of you. All right, so my final pitch to you. Why should you guys embrace this? It is a little bit more work. It's a little bit different, right? But I can tell you all your customers are interested in what you're doing in sustainability. They ask a lot. This is a good answer, right? Your employees care. They're gonna, solve one of the biggest FinOps problems about how to get engineers to take action. They volunteer. They come up with the ideas. They show up. Besides, your FinOps practice, you're already doing a lot of these cost-saving initiatives. So measure it and take advantage of it. It's going to resonate with more and more people. Because the dollars are great, but dollars and more is better. The last thing I'll leave you in this space, so if you're involved in this space, we do know that there's likely legislation coming in the sustainability space. So it's better to come in, start getting your knowledge in there, building your capabilities so that when that legislation comes, you're in a better place to go through and address that too. It's one of those crawl, walk, run. So if you're already at a walk by the time it comes, you're going to be better off. So thank you all. That's.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. We do have some time for questions. So if there aren't any questions in the room, of course it's on the other side of the room.
Ruben needed some exercise.
Karma, it's karma. Oh, yeah, here we go.
Yeah, great presentation. I love the impact you pointed out with engineers, how you can get movement on this. Do you do any KPIs or any other metrics? Because I think of this as usage and cost and sustainability or carbon footprint. When you do reporting, do you include all three? What's your mindset on that?
We are all still building this, right? So yes, we're going to walk into that, right? So it's a measure phase now. We're going to walk into how to make it a KPI kind of thing, because it can't be just a pure overall reduction. We're still moving to the cloud. So, it needs to be more advanced. It'll probably be some sort of a GreenOps utilization metric or something. But we will move into that, but we're not quite there yet. Let's get one right there. Oh, sorry, I can't see you in the light. I thought you were Ruben.
Oh, no, no worries. So has there been any work to date to evaluate whether or not Kubernetes can have a significant effect on carbon, doing things like packing nodes onto individual clusters, that sort of thing?
So very much a utilization question, right? So if you do Kubernetes really well, I think it'll have a very positive effect. But it's hard to do Kubernetes really well. I mean, we already talked a little bit about it as an organization, right? You have to design them well. Yeah, applications have to use it well, and if everything comes together, it'll be really good. But if you don't, it won't be.
Are there any current industry benchmarks already existing when it comes to sustainability and GreenOps, specifically GreenOps? And is there any vision or roadmap? I know it's like a far off thought, but any vision roadmap to kind of get FinOps and those benchmarks if they exist?
So the FinOps org has a sustainability working group. So we're trying to bring this to the forefront and work into those kind of things. So that's what the work is active. Beyond FinOps, you know, Europe actually sort of leads us in this space, right? And so a lot of the things that are happening in Europe eventually come over here to impact us. So Europe's, you know, actually requiring reporting now, and I think they're going to get into more detail around how to actually have reporting standards, and those are the kind of things that'll come to us. But there aren't really good standards in a lot of the spaces.
Hi there.
Craig.
Question about sort of the CO2 reporting level from the hyperscalers. My understanding is that Azure don't report down at resource level, and I think you're relying on cloud sustainability, cloudcarbonfootprint.org as an indirect supplier of resource information for AWS. So how do you see the challenges about actually being able to attribute CO2 down to your actual resource level to make it actionable?
So the Cloud Carbon tool will do that for you. The cloud providers are moving some fast toward it, some we're not sure about, right? So like Azure is going to announce something soon, I think in beginning Q4, for something like that. So it'll change over time. This space is actually changing very, very rapidly. I imagine this time next year, every vendor will have some version of this probably built in or something like that, right? So you're going to see a rapid change in this space. So the problem is there aren't great answers to what you have, because again, this tool is an estimation, right? It's a really good estimation, but I'm sorry? Well, no, their methodology is, it's been vetted. It's the best there is in the industry right now. But again, a lot of players are suddenly, again, I can tell you I've talked to a bunch of startups in this space just in this conference alone, so.
I have a question here. Will there
Thank
be
you, sir.
any tax credit incentives if anyone applies GreenOps?
Not directly that I know of, because these are vendor ones, so I don't know that you could ever claim reductions, because you can do it for like your data centers when you're doing 1 and 2 scope, but I don't think you can do it for scope 3s.
So I have a follow-up question on that one, maybe a selfish question. Like, who's driving the GreenOps initiatives within Fidelity? Is that the FinOps team, or is it top-down? Is it an ask from an executive question?
We've been bringing it to the senior leadership, so it
it's
started from the bottom and it's working its way up, if we're considered the bottom.
Cheers. So good speech and thanks for that. We've heard this week around things like the FinOps stack being applied to different areas of the business. I just wanted to know, within Fidelity, you applying the sustainability and GreenOps stuff into your end device management, computing, and stuff outside of the cloud as well as inside of the cloud?
So I'm espousing just taking care of the cloud itself because it gets really complicated when trying to mix them together. It's different groups, different responsibilities, and different ways you go about managing outside the cloud. So they're not really an integrated approach. We have different
task forces for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, because when you're doing, your physical structures, it's capital investments, it's the facilities teams, your data center teams that are doing all that activity. In the cloud, it's the cloud teams, and they're totally autonomous.
Yeah, cool. Okay. Thank you.
Any more questions? Oh, of course, the other side.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi.
So we're equating sustainability to carbon emission reduction, right?
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you can use to measure sustainability? Also, because
Someday
yeah.
there will be. Right
Yeah.
now, this is the only
Okay.
thing we can measure.
So
I mean, it's sort of a proxy for a lot of things, right? Because if you know much about data centers, there's gases, halon gases used for cooling, and a lot of water, and a lot of other things that go into it. But in the cloud, you don't have active measures for those things yet. And we would need the cloud providers to really drive that kind of detail.
So I kind of was imagining all those workloads now landing in France and being powered by a 50 years old nuclear power plant that generates some waste. So I don't know. Some people may not find that sustainable.
So yeah, the nuclear issue is a very dynamic thing in the U.S. It's probably why we don't see it much here. But it's considered green in this sort of environment.
Good time for one more. Okay, then thank you so much, Paul. And
All right,
let's give him
thank
a
you
round
all.
of applause. Thank you.
Thanks for watching that session. I'm sitting here in San Diego right after FinOps X. We hope you join us next year here live 2024. In the meantime, please subscribe to the channel and join the community. Get involved, join the summits, get in a working group, and don't forget to get FinOps certified. Because next year here in San Diego for FinOps X, it's going to be twice as big. Come join the party. Come meet your people. Welcome home.